Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, our name is Bitronistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by Ambassador Eli Yerushalmi. Eli, thank you so much for joining me today.
Pleasure being here, as usual.
I always learn so much when hearing you and speaking with you, and it's a great treat for all of our viewers who are tuned in from all over the place and sending in questions on my phone in the chat. So before we get to any of their questions, let's just dive straight in. And what can you share with us? What kind of briefing can you share with us right now, please?
Okay, first of all, let's start with the most historic event that happened in the last week. That's the re-election of President Trump. I think this is really an historic event, not only for Israel but for the whole world. This is a major change, and as we're looking in the last day or two, all the positions that President Trump is filling in Israel, we're starting to call this the Dream Team. Meaning from the ambassador to the Secretary of State and on and on. Alice Stefanik being the ambassador to the United Nations. I think in terms of Israel, this couldn't be better. It doesn't mean that we won't have problems. It doesn't mean that Trump will have, a little bit of a different agenda that what we think. But to my opinion, at least, and to most Israelis, I think this is much better than the other way around. And of course, we have great expectations from the next United States government. What this basically means for Israel is on the war front. It probably will bring more support from the United States to Israel. And this it means that we can handle the war differently, especially against Iran and against the nuclear Iran. Most of President Trump himself, and the others in the next U.S. government, U.S. cabinet, have expressed opinions which are very much anti-Iran and for destroying its nuclear capabilities and so on and so forth. That is good news for Israel. The second thing is, I think this can actually achieve a breakthrough in terms of the peace negotiations that we have today with the Arab world. They've been stalled for the last few years since President Trump left office. I think we were going to return to the Abraham Accords, peace with Saudi Arabia, peace with other Arab countries, which also means a fundamental change in the Middle East and the attitudes of different countries towards Israel, and of course towards the United States. And it also, for those who are interested in Israel's domestic issues and the problems that we have, I think it will also strengthen the Israeli government. The opposition in Israel was not only opposing Netanyahu and the current government, they also opposed President Trump. Most of them wanted Harris to be elected. So even in that sense, the opposition will feel that it has less support or almost no support from the United States. In terms of the world, this is also a major change. If we just look at two areas of the world, Ukraine, Russia, the war that's going on, Europe, I have a feeling that this means a tremendous change. We might even see the end of the war there. And I think both leaders, Putin and Zelensky, understand that dealing with President Trump is going to be a little bit different, and it might bring an end to the hostilities. The same with China. I'm sure that China had a thought of maybe invading Taiwan and expanding its powers in the Far East, in the China Sea, and so on. I don't think this is going to happen now. I think the Chinese are going to negotiate, And maybe if we look at this grand picture, what's happening in the world, we might have avoided a third world war. Maybe. I'm not sure. We still have 2 months to go. We have to see what happens and so on. But to my opinion, and I said this here a few times, the world was going towards a world war situation, and I think that's pretty much blocked in the current situation. Let's start looking at the Middle East a little bit. First of all, Iran. Iran, that's the major issue, which is going on in this war. To my opinion, at least my personal opinion, I think to most Israelis, if the Iranian nuclear capabilities are not destroyed or dismantled, this means that this war didn't end. That this war might, come back to us in a couple of years. And so this is the main issue. What's happening with the Iranians is after the Israeli attack on Iran, remember they promised us revenge and so on. And the latest news that we're hearing from Iran is that they're reassessing, that they want to negotiate with President Trump, all kinds of things like that. So I think the possibility of an Iranian attack on Israel looks now a little bit bleaker than it was before. We'll have to see, because Iran is a country that you cannot exactly expect its behavior. Lebanon on a northern front. Lately, the news is all kinds of pieces about maybe there's going to be some kind of settlement in Lebanon between Israel and the Hezbollah and so on. Personally, as I look at it, at the battlefronts, at the rockets still fired at Israel, at the amount of territory that we already took from the Lebanese along the frontier, I don't think it's enough. I don't think it's going towards a settlement. I might be surprised. Maybe Hezbollah, they're so beaten up that they might decide to go way north of the Litani and never come back and things like that. But I don't see this coming, at least in the near future. I don't see the Biden administration solving this issue. In Gaza, we still didn't finish the job. Unfortunately, we lost 5 of our men yesterday. We're still looking at a situation where we have to bring back security to the line between the Gaza area and Israel. And of course, we have to bring our hostages back. There's a lot of talk about maybe if the Hezbollah and Lebanese want a deal in which we'll stop attacking Lebanon, maybe the hostages, that's going to be the thing that they'll have to give in. They are the ones that connected Lebanon and Gaza, so they will probably have to deliver if they want to deal with Israel. We have to also look at Judea and Samaria. Judea and Samaria is a very complicated area. Israel is attacking there all the time. We know that different elements of both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority are organized in a military way. We could expect an attack actually coming from there towards central Israel. So the situation there is also very, very elusive and very, very dangerous. A point about Syria. Something is happening with Syria. Meaning, I don't know the details, but I know that Assad probably made a decision not to cooperate with Hezbollah and with Iran. They're starting to think about a different direction. I think Assad is starting to understand where this war is going to. There are a lot of talks about even some kind of cooperation between Israel and Syria, which sounds almost unreal, unbelievable. But no doubt something is happening on the Syrian front, and I think that Assad is reassessing, and this is very important because we have to remember that through Syria, that's where the arms come from Iran, Iraq, and then through Syria into Lebanon. So if Assad changes his mind, this might be a change in the whole strategic situation in the north of Israel. Jordan, the king is, of course, not saying he's pro-Israel, but he understands that without Israel, he will not survive. Jordan is in a very, very shaky situation. We've been seeing lately all kinds of issues on the Jordanian border, trying to smuggle weapons, etc. The Jordanian border is not quiet, and we're now forming a few divisions that are going to protect the boundaries of Israel along the Jordanian border. Don't forget that the Jordanian border is the longest border that we have with any other Arab country. It goes pretty much from a little bit south of the Sea of Galilee to south of Eilat. So this is very, very crucial for Israel, especially if they're trying to smuggle arms into Israel, and the Iranians look at it as the future ground battlefield with Israel. Egypt is, of course, very important in this context. Egypt, if I spoke to you 2 weeks ago, it's a major threat in terms of even a possibility of being involved in this war. Because for them, Philadelphia and the border are very, very crucial. They're building a huge army, but now with President Trump coming in, the Egyptians are probably reassessing. They will probably go to a different direction, going back to peace with Israel, going back to the Abraham Accords. So we might see a tremendous change with Egypt. Turkey. Turkey and Erdogan especially are holding a very, very extreme position vis-a-vis Israel. Today, there are all kinds of rumors that he might even think about completely disconnecting diplomatic relations with Israel. We have to look at Turkey very, very carefully. Turkey is a country that might even decide to enter a war with Israel, meaning it's so bad. But again, Erdogan's advisors are telling him, don't get into this mess. It's better to have some kind of, a balance of power with Israel. But who knows? Meaning the guy is a president that he's very, very Islamic and very unpredictable. The last issue I wanted to talk about is, of course, anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism since the events in Amsterdam, which we had a whole fearful night here last week with the Maccabi Tel Aviv people in Amsterdam being attacked by radical Islamists on the streets of Amsterdam. It's no secret. We all knew this is coming. We all know what's happening in Europe. We know what's happening in Holland. We know what's happening in France and Germany and England and in all of Western Europe. Very, very dangerous situation. It's the rise of Islam. I don't think the Europeans can do much to block this. I think it might be a lost war. I know there was some kind of rabbinical conference of European rabbis last week, and they called Europe the lost continent. And I have a feeling that they're right. And I think the events in Europe will actually help President Trump in terms of coping with the immigration issue in the United States and other countries like Australia that has this kind of problem and is also blocking immigration, especially Islamic immigration to Australia. I think this will help the Western world start putting a fort on this situation. But again, in Europe, it's very, very difficult, especially Western Europe. Eastern Europe is less of a problem. Eastern Europe, countries like Hungary and Poland and so on, they stood very firm against an Islamic entry into their countries. Again, the situation after the election of President Trump looks a little bit, or maybe much better than it was a few weeks ago. This was again major, critical for the history of the United States, for the history of Israel, for the history of the world. And let's hope that we're going into brighter days, even though there are still a lot of problems on the table. Thank you.
Eli, thank you for sharing all of that. You really did cover many countries, gave us a very good overview. I want to ask you about something you didn't cover, which is I don't think I heard Saudi Arabia in there. And,
I
there have been
mentioned,
recent
yeah.
maybe you mentioned it. Okay, but either way, just to follow up more on that, there have been recent reports that Saudi Arabia and Iran are coming closer together. There are certain overtures of cooperation. I'm wondering if you can validate whether that's actually real and what we could expect to see between these two regional enemies.
Well, I think that up to a few weeks ago, we heard a lot about this kind of Saudi-Iranian cooperation, which sounds almost absurd, knowing that Saudi Arabia is the leader of the Sunnite world and Iran is the leader of the Shiite world, and the animosity between them is much greater than the animosity between those parties and Israel. I think that the fact that President Trump is coming up will push Saudi Arabia, if it had any other thoughts, back into the camp of, let's say, the Abraham Accords, if you wish, towards peace with Israel, towards better relations with the United States. I don't think they have something to look for with Iran. Maybe Iran will change. We hear a lot of things going on in Iran. If you watched Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday talking to the Iranian people and telling them, that their regime is much more afraid of them, the Iranian people, than of Israel, and things are going to change in Iran. I'm looking at a much weaker Iran, both militarily and economically, and I don't think the Saudis, who are very, very smart, I don't think they're going to align themselves with Iran.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. It does sound very odd to hear these things in the news, and again, you question whether they're actually true. Okay, you spoke about Amsterdam and the pogrom, the rise of Jew hatred in Europe. Are you able to elaborate a little bit on the extent to which this is just bad for Jews and bad for the world, or does it have a direct impact on Israel?
First of all, it's bad for the Jews, it's bad for the world. No doubt. Meaning those who knew this was coming would tell you, including myself, will tell you that for Israel, this is a pretty dangerous situation, because so far we always looked at Western Europe, even flights to Rome, Paris, London, Frankfurt, as part of our civilization. That was kind of, the closest coast to Israel, en route, of course, to the United States. And now there's more than a feeling that historically, Western Europe is going to become a kind of Islamic continent. And it's just enough to take the globe and to understand that if Western Europe becomes Islamic, that's bad news for Israel. Of course, these are things that are going to take, a long time and so on. But if we look at the demography of things, it might be we're only 20 to 30 years away from this event, and maybe even closer. So in terms of Israel, this situation is very, very dangerous, and we're trying to wake up the world. I still remember myself as part of the Israeli embassy in London, that we knew what was going on inside the major mosques in London, and the kinds of preaching that they're getting, and even the kinds of arms that they have hidden under the mosques. And we spoke with the British officials and so on, and they behaved as if we're talking about science fiction. So the problem is there. The Europeans have awakened. They haven't awakened. Actually, some of them are still sleeping, and it's a very dangerous situation for Israel strategically. If we look at the global situation, now we have, in a way, the United States back, because if let's say, to bring it to the extreme, if Harris would have won the election, even Fortress USA for us was more doubtful than it was before. And of course, we're looking at the East. We're looking at countries like India, for instance, which is going to be a major superpower in the future. So we have to look where Israel is standing in the middle of all this. But no doubt that Western Europe is going to be a major issue for us in coming years.
So, as an ambassador, you obviously have extensive experience in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and speaking with governments abroad. This issue about your language was Islamic entry into all of these countries, short of trying to impact immigration policy country by country by country, what would an Israeli diplomat do to actually get that message across?
Well, it needs a lot of conversation, a lot of convincing. First of all, you have to make them understand that they have a problem. Today, a lot of them know that they have a problem. The Dutch understand that very clearly. If the governments don't understand it, they'll understand it in elections. But the numbers of the Muslim population in these countries is just growing and growing, and you have a very difficult issue. We're telling them, to keep an eye on what's going on. To see that today we heard news that the ones that organized all the events in Amsterdam was actually a Hamas cell in Amsterdam. So all of us, foreign ministry, the Mossad, all our agencies and so on are telling the European countries, look, this and this and this is happening on your soil, and be careful and do things to stop this. But we're very limited. We're very limited because we're talking about democracies. Look at France. That's pretty much the extreme. You look at President Macron. In the beginning of the war, he was in favor of Israel and so on. And look how far he went to be against us, especially on Lebanon. And part of it, we know, it's no secret. It's the Islamic presence in France, in Paris. France is very different than what it used to be. So it's a battle, but we probably meaning the European people, meaning the European Christians, if you want, and other populations. I have a terrible feeling that they really lost it.
Now, let me ask you, I'm hearing more and more Israeli officials, so to speak, speaking to the Lebanese people, speaking to the Iranian people in Hebrew, nonetheless, but they're speaking to to our neighbors and trying to encourage them to wake up. And I'm curious to know if you think that's a realistic expectation for Israeli leaders to try to impact change or hope for change in Lebanon and Iran, when, as you just said, across Western Europe, we're not even able to get that message across.
Well, actually, I'm much more optimistic about Iran and Lebanon than I am about Europe, because the Iranians and Lebanese understood very well what it means to be under this kind of Shiite control. And yesterday in Iran, meaning the what happened yesterday when Netanyahu spoke to the Iranian people, the Iranians put in a lot of effort to try to block this Netanyahu from entering social media in Iran, probably unsuccessful. So the Iranians heard the message loud and clear, and I think that a lot of them support it. And we were hearing things from Iran. They're just waiting for us to come. They didn't build much on the United States until President Trump was elected, but they did build on Israel. And the fact that Israel is already bombing, that they were very disappointed that our bombing in Iran a few weeks ago was pretty minor in their opinion. I think they didn't grasp what the Iranians later grasped, that this was something major, and that they shouldn't go to war with us. But still, it didn't come to a point where you saw 100 Israeli jets flying low over Tehran and half the city burning. It didn't come to that, because if it would have come to that, maybe the people would have gone out of their houses and start a revolution. But we're very close to that. Meaning in Iran, things are evolving. The same in Lebanon. In Lebanon, most of the Lebanese don't like the Hezbollah and the Shiites. Even the Shiites, a lot of them don't like Hezbollah. So Lebanon is looking for a solution that will save the country, that will find a way how to live together, Christian and Druze and Sunnite and Shiite. And what we're talking to them gets into their minds. We see a lot of Lebanese saying that they don't want war with Israel. There's no reason for war with Israel. They have no conflict with Israel. The Palestinian issue is an issue, but it's not for them to solve. And they really want to get out of this mess. They don't need a war with Israel when Israel will start bombing them, and taking out their electricity and so on. They have enough problems as is. They can't even get rid of the garbage. So I think the Lebanese are starting to understand the differently. And again, as I said, it might sound as an absurd, but our message is getting much clearer into Lebanon and Iran than it's getting into the minds of leaders in Western Europe.
Eli, that's good to hear. That's very promising. Final question, and I appreciate your time and all of the questions that all of our viewers are sending in. Final question. If the message is getting across to our neighbors, is the message loud and clear here in Israel? What are your thoughts on Israeli society understanding what this war is about and the resilience necessary?
Well, I think the Israeli society understands very well what this war is about. There's, of course, a strong opposition in Israel, as you know. I'm not sure it's as strong as the institutions that it controls, but let's say the polls are showing a very positive vibe. And so looking at the way the army is fighting, looking at the way the Israeli public is behaving and so on, the vast majority of Israelis understand very well what's going on. And I think we're very strong. There are things which sometimes, make you really, shake in terms of the judicial system and so on. But even in that sense, I think we're getting there.
Ambassador Eli Yerushalmi, it's always a great pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining and sharing all of this.
Thank you.
Thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you to all of our supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.